We don't know if new Chicago Bears head coach Matt Eberflus is going to lead the team everywhere that they want them to go. But we do have a pretty good sense that his players are going to buy in, his coaching staff is going to buy in, and that's at least going to be a welcome change from what we've seen in recent years in Chicago. This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lorin Cox. I'm an analyst for Pro Football Focus, and I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Bears. You can like Locked On Bears on Facebook. Join the Locked On Bears Facebook group for even more Bears talk. And make sure you hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at GetUpside. Just download the free GetUpside app. Use our promo code TOUCHDOWN to get 25 cents per gallon or more cash back when you fill up your tank. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today and every day. On the show today, we will actually hear from Indianapolis Colts head coach Frank Reich, sharing some of his thoughts on Bears head coach Matt Eberflus, how he was able to communicate to players in Indianapolis, why there was so much buy-in, how he was able to go through that buy-in, what to expect from new Bears defensive coordinator Alan Williams, and how Flus, as they call him, Eberflus, nicknamed Flus, how he sort of adapted over the years. We'll go from there to updating day 2 from the Senior Bowl, the second day of practices out in the rain, some of the top prospects that we saw perform today, looking a little bit more at the wide receivers, defensive backs, and some tight ends in there as well. Yesterday was more of the offensive line for us. And then we'll wrap up with some thoughts from other friends here on the Locked On Podcast Network, sharing all of our observations, more sets of eyes from the field down here in Mobile. Now, again, those of you watching on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel will again notice yet another different background behind me. I'm actually not in my hotel room, but in the Locked On Airbnb down here in Mobile, where a lot of the other Locked On hosts are, where we do the Locked On live stream on the Locked On NFL Draft channel. So it looks a little different. Should still sound the same as the rest of the week. And of course, we find ways to keep the show going here. That's what we always do here on Locked On Bears. So I want to start with the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts, Frank Reich. He took some time, really kind of a classy move, to answer questions from the Chicago media about Eberflus. It was like 20 minutes worth of a virtual press conference to talk about a coach who's no longer on the Indianapolis Colts, but I think it does speak to the relationship that Eberflus and Reich had in Indianapolis, and not only the words that Reich said about him, but the fact that he would even take time to talk to the media to speak so highly of a coach who's now on an opponent and, in his way of winning a Super Bowl potentially, competing for the same goals. But I thought it was really illuminating for a lot of the ways that Eberflus was able to communicate his philosophy, that he was able to measure a lot of the things he's trying to implement in Chicago, and the way, more like logistically, how it actually worked in Indianapolis. Because we can hear, leadership and toughness and fundamentals all day long, but like actually putting that into place is what can separate coaches and can separate people that just say the right things versus coaches that are able to successfully do the right things. And all indications from Flus, with some of these really specifics from Frank Reich, really lay out how things just were that much different for Eberflus in Indianapolis, and why you can see why the Bears would be all in on buying in on this defensive coordinator as their head coach.
Frank, I had 2 questions for you. The first one, you mentioned at the outset that Flus has very clear standards, and I'm curious if you could sort of expand on the specifics of how he makes it clear to his players and probably also his coaches what those standards are and how he measures that.
Well, the part that I heard of the press conference, I was down grabbing lunch, and I heard him talking about his HITS principle. And let me just tell you now, like, he eats, sleeps, drinks, bleeds that in every aspect. Okay, so those are the standards. Those are the standards, and everything is going to be measured up against those things. And it's going to be very clear to the players. It's going to be very clear to the players what this HITS principle is all about.
You've also had 4 years with Alan Williams there, and Flus mentioned yesterday his relationship with him. What has left an impression on you about Alan as a coach and how his skills would translate to a coordinator role?
Alan has really good command of the whole picture. Alan is a fast on his feet as a thinker. Listening, being on the headset and hearing Flus call the defenses and interact with the defensive staff, hearing Alan's input, hearing the dialogue between he and Flus, how dynamic it was, how much Flus trusted him, over those 4 years, seeing that relationship develop. I just think Alan Allen has great energy on the field. I think, watching Allen run drills on the field, he's got good energy, good body language. He's got a good positive vibe to him, can connect. So Allen's an excellent football coach.
Colleen?
Hi, Frank. When you talk about Flus's hits principle and his standards, what have you seen from him in terms of his ability to get players to buy into that?
Just the seeing it on tape, and the consistency of it. In the 4 years here as a head coach, I'll give you this picture. I walk out onto the field on game day, and invariably over 4 years, almost every week, I'm going to be talking to somebody on the other staff, and somebody is going to comment to me, how hard our defense plays, how hard our team plays, but really how hard our defense plays and how they run to the ball. A lot of people talk about how we run to the ball, how we take the ball away. I think that says it more than anything. Just watch the tape, look at the results.
John?
Hey, Frank. Matt was talking yesterday about wanting to implement his defensive system here in Chicago. I'm curious, when you think back to when he came to Indianapolis, what stood out to you about that process and the way he went about doing that with a new group of players?
One of the things I appreciate about Flus is, I've mentioned this clear vision, he's going to play his system, but, and it was very methodical, very, there was a progression to it, which I think is important. And then, but the other thing I think is important that I saw over the 4 years is, he adapted, which is what we all want to do as coaches. You got to adapt to what your players do best. You got to adapt to what the offense is doing. And, Flus and I had a lot of discussions over those 4 years. Marcus Brady and I kind of running the offensive side of things, Bubba Ventrone running special teams, right? And then Flus running the defense. How do we do that? What's the right way to do that as a coach? That we're going to do what we do, but we also have to keep evolving and adapting year to year, week to week, year to year. How is this, we came here 4 years ago. How is this getting better? We're not just going to stay status quo. And I think Flus has showed a good ability to, come in with a system and really let's nail down these fundamental principles, but then let's also be willing to adapt. And let's also have a vision to incorporate that in to what our players do best and how we counter what we're seeing from the opposing team.
That last part in particular, adaptability, is so much of what it felt like the Chicago Bears were missing under Matt Nagy and the previous regime of never quite getting the players exactly in the positions that were going to put them to where they could be successful. And I think that's such the refreshing thing we've been wanting to hear from whoever the next Bears head coach was going to be. And it's been a pretty consistent message about Matt Eberflus. It's not a guarantee that it's going to work and it's going to lead them to Super Bowls and all these things. But again, sort of laying the foundation and starting off on the right foot is at least something we can try and be encouraged about. Not reading too much into press conference quotes, and we have to see it on the field and all that stuff, but it seems to be there, right? The baseline seems to be there, and I'm excited to see how they start to implement that. And of course, then what players they add into that mix. Players are going to be just as important as how they are coached. And we've been getting a pretty up close and personal look at a lot of the players Bears could be looking at in the NFL draft. Saw Ryan Poles again on the field today at the Senior Bowl, talking to some of his former Chiefs scouts. We'll get into some of that and notes on all the top prospects that we've been looking at that the Bears should keep an eye on next on Locked On Bears. The Senior Bowl down here in Mobile is all about upside in these draft prospects. And speaking of upside, we got an incredible app for anybody who drives a car, puts gasoline in a vehicle. It's called GetUpside. If you need to get some upside, the same way all these NFL teams are looking for upside at the Senior Bowl, then you need to download the GetUpside app in the App Store or Google Play. Locked On Bears listeners are getting cash back for every gallon of gas they fill in their tank every time they fill up. Just download the free GetUpside app, enter in the promo code TOUCHDOWN for 25 cents per gallon or more cash back when you fill up. Stop paying for full price at the pump anymore. Some people who fill up and drive a lot are making as much as $200 to $300 a year in cash back, and there's absolutely no catch. The cash back is added right into your GetUpside account, and then you can cash out at any time. You can direct deposit into your bank account, or if you'd rather go through PayPal, they do that. You can even cash out with an e-gift card to Amazon or other online retailers. Super easy to use. Download the free GetUpside app and use our promo code touchdown to get 25 cents per gallon or more cash back when you fill up. That's promo code touchdown in the GetUpside app. A lot of the upside down here in Mobile, especially on day 2 of the Senior Bowl, really stood out in this tight end group for both the national and American teams. One coached by the Jets, one coached by the Lions, but they're all doing a lot of the same things, and it's just a matter of sort of who you're seeing at what time. And really, some of the top tight end prospects in this draft class are down here. Really, I think Colorado State tight end Trey McBride has been the one that really looks just like legitimate. Like, we knew he came in as one of the top build tight ends in this class, and he has played through and earned every bit of that recognition. He's big, he's fast, he's strong, he's physical, catches the ball well, it separates against linebackers, seems to be able to block and hold up pretty well in that area too. I mean, just the complete package of a tight end. Not a guaranteed home run, but just when he's playing against top talent here on defense and on his teammates, he's one that's really stood out. And then Ohio State tight end Jeremy Ruckert is one that's been fun to watch because he got so overshadowed in that Buckeyes offense with so many great wide receivers there. I mean, it was explosive offense, but like he wasn't regularly targeted in some of the same ways just because they were putting the ball in those receivers' hands. But like he looks again like strong hands, tough. Like when the ball is late coming from the quarterbacks here, which happened a lot. The quarterback play has been mediocre at best. When the ball is coming late and the linebacker is able to then catch up to him and attack his arms as the ball is coming in, I saw Rucker just go out, grab, snag, and hold on to that ball with the strength in his hands in particular to fight through that contact and pull it in, despite guys not being draped all over him because he couldn't separate, but draped on him because they had enough time to recover because the pass from quarterbacks were late. On the American team, again, we mentioned him on yesterday's podcast, but Coastal Carolina tight end Isaiah Likely, for a guy who's 6'4", 241, he can really move well. I mean, I almost wondered if he looked smaller than that from the stands, but when you sort of that's what he literally measured and weighed down here, and when you kind of combine those physical tools, the speed and the size and the ability to catch, I mean, he looks like a guy that I'm really excited about. It's hard to pin like a specific round on him, but in what's already a strong tight end class, he could be a little bit later among that group. It's hard to tell exactly where, but might sneak down a few and be able to land him without needing to spend another premium pick on a tight end for the Bears, for example, but still be able to land potentially a high quality player there. It's really, for me, I was watching the wide receivers and DBs and tight ends, pass catching versus pass coverage quite a bit today. And so from a wide receiver perspective, I don't know if we can call him a sleeper at this point. I mean, it's still early and I don't have a sense of like exactly how late he's going to go, but the name that's not getting enough attention, I don't think down here, that really has impressed me over and over again, back-to-back days, is Memphis wide receiver Calvin Austin. Now he's listed and measured in at 5'7" and 3/8, 170 something pounds, right? He is small. He doesn't look quite that small. I mean, he looks small, but not like aggressively small, but like he definitely is small. So the question for me is only how can he hold up physically in terms of like taking hits? But he checked every other box for me. I mean, his best traits are his speed and change of direction. He's able to slow down and speed up with such a smooth change of speed without having to come to a complete stop or anything like that. Like he just moves so fluidly and naturally. But he's not just the short slot receiver, underneath route type receiver. No, he was taking deep shots, catching the deep ball, stacking cornerbacks behind him as he's tracking the ball deep downfield. He looked like a well-rounded receiver who just happens to also be 5'7" and 170 pounds or whatever it ended up being. So like he's going to fall because he doesn't have any sort of size whatsoever, but like seems like he can do pretty much everything else. Because everyone's raving about the North Dakota State wide receiver Christian Watson, who again looked great. 6'4", big, strong wide receiver, was able to separate pretty well. And what stood out for me was his blocking, on the backside of running plays and the front side too, but the effort and the strength really blocking through the whistle. Just like comparatively, I think I came in with like a wide receiver blocking bias a little bit from just seeing Bears wide receivers be so bad at it. I was talking to Robert Schmitz from Windy City Gridiron, watching practice with him. He covers the Bears. If you don't know him, he drafted Bears coverage, great guy. Definitely recommend following him for all his work. But like he and I were both commenting how it's like just fun to watch wide receivers actually like try and blocking hard and actually be successful at blocking hard. He really did a great job there too. Boise State wide receiver Khalil Shakur also specifically stood out for his blocking. But I really liked Romeo Dobbs, the Nevada wide receiver. Just, again, like well-rounded, does everything well. 6'2", great route runner, really nice releases off the line of scrimmage, was getting open all over the field. I think it helped that he was catching passes some of the time from his college quarterback. So you had two players really on the same page when otherwise all these players are brand new and they're still getting used to each other. So I think there's maybe a slight advantage he was getting there, but like he's not the biggest, he's not the fastest, but he gets open and runs great routes and has good hands. And like that wins in the NFL, even if he doesn't have like the elite physical traits necessarily. He's not slow, he's not small, he's 6'2" and he runs fast, but just like he's not over the top speed or over the top size. And so he's not going to be that sexy pick the teams might swing the fences for at a wide receiver, but I mean, solid number 2 guy for sure, and be a great fit, I think, with what the Chicago Bears have with Darnell Mooney. The other wide receivers I wanted to mention real quick was Rutgers wide receiver Beau Melton. Long speed. Like when he gets off the line of scrimmage, when he gets a free release, just shot out of a cannon, just goes and can blow by you if you don't slow him down. And he's pretty good at getting off the line of scrimmage, but at the top of his route, contact could slow him down a little bit more. And I thought he wasn't able to separate as well, like downfield. But if he was able to separate, after his release at the line of scrimmage, then he was gone, and it was really a tough thing for a lot of these cornerbacks to keep up with it. It felt like, generally speaking, the defensive backs had more, I don't want to say overall more struggles, but I noticed a lot of guys looked kind of stiff and slow, and that can be they can be kind of put in tough spots in these one-on-one drills where they're at a disadvantage already, but just something to sort of keep an eye on with these guys, not to get too over the top with any of them individually. Like I think the Illinois cornerback Kirby Joseph was just mentally a step late reacting to receivers on their breaks. It just seemed like he was always sort of a step behind. Whereas like the Baylor defensive back, Jalen Petre, I believe, much more like savvy, smart, intuitive, not thinking, just reading and reacting and not having those like sort of process. It was just natural for him to stay with receivers and really good like at making contact with them without committing pass interference or grabbing them or pulling them down or doing any of those things, but like slowing them down with the things he can get away with as a shifty defensive back. Thought similar things about the Georgia cornerback, Darian Kendrick, just like sticky, mirrors, stays with him, but again, without being over the top grabby. Because like on the contrast, the UTSA defensive back, Tariq Wooden, very stiff, very grabby, and flagged at least a couple times, if I remember correctly, just from being, just too close and too physical up on a guy. Like you want them to be physical, but not that physical. And some of those guys are still trying to figure out what they can and can't exactly get away with against brand new wide receivers they've never seen before. So it's always the disclaimer for all of our Senior Bowl observations. That's like, it's 2 days of practice, right? It's not a full evaluation. It's not a referendum on them as a draft prospect or as a potential NFL player, but it is a good up close and personal chance to see them over and over again rep these different skills that are directly applicable to what they're going to do in the NFL. And of course, every NFL team, including Bears GM Ryan Poles, was down on the sideline watching practice in the rain, getting pretty wet like everybody else. I was told other people spotted Coach Eberflus. I did not see him personally, but other people said he was also down there watching the practice. I did see Ryan Poles in particular watching the offensive and defensive line drills, in the individuals and the team drills, like specifically watching those guys in the trenches seemed to be where he happened to be paying the most attention today. Of course, they're going to watch every prospect. Doesn't mean they're keen on any of these guys more than any of the others, but just former offensive lineman, watching offensive lineman happens to be a position of need for the Chicago Bears. Put 2 and 2 together. I'm curious to see if they end up drafting any of these Senior Bowl offensive linemen. But hey, I've only got one set of eyes to see what was going on at the Senior Bowl, but our Locked On Podcast Network crew down here has many. And so we'll turn to them to help us kind of gather even more observations here from day 2 in Mobile, Alabama, next on Locked On Bears. The big game is just a week and a half away, and hey, if you're not hyped up for the end of the football season for what's going to be a great matchup, I don't know if I can help you, but we can make you even more hyped up with our friends at Bet Online. They've got you covered with more props, odds, and lines than ever before to just give you some stakes when it's 2 teams that you don't particularly care about, the Bengals and the Rams. You might not have any connection to them, but if you want to make the Super Bowl exciting, you can place all sorts of bets on anything you can think of on the field and halftime show and pregame and all those different things. BetOnline.net is the place for all of it. It's the best spot for all of your sports betting needs, scores, podcasts, and news throughout the postseason, but also through the rest of sports. It's not just football. BetOnline has up-to-the-minute info on pro and college hoops, NHL, boxing, UFC. If we have a baseball season, if it's not locked out, they'll have odds for that too, plus live real-time updates of games going on right as you're watching them. Don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available for the 2022 season at BetOnline, where the game starts. The Senior Bowl is an opportunity for teams like the Bears to add some really important parts to their, at least get a look at some of these really important potential parts for their team. And hey, if you need important parts, our friends at rockauto.com are always going to be the place we recommend. Their online selection of auto parts is better than anybody else. I mean, you just can't find that deep of a catalog at such great prices because rockauto.com charges you the same as they charge anybody else. Some of the chain part stores in your town, they'll have different price tiers if you're a professional mechanic versus a do-it-yourselfer like us, but rockauto.com's prices are the same for everybody. So don't spend up to twice as much somewhere else. All you got to do is go on their site, you enter in your car's make and model, and boom, pulls up this huge list of any kind of part you could possibly think of. I'm not a total gearhead, and I don't know exactly what an engine control module does, but I know I can get one at rockauto.com. Check out their selection right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. When you do check out, fill out their How Did You Hear About Us box and write in the words locked on so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. So I'm not the only Locked On Podcast Network host down here in Mobile, Alabama. We've got such a great crew of guys, not only fun people to be around that are good at covering their respective teams, but also guys that do pay close attention to the NFL draft and know how to scout prospects and know what to look for at different positions, know what to not get caught up on at the Senior Bowl, and know how not to fall for some of the falls of understanding why things are happening on the field when it comes to new players working with new teammates and new coaches and new plays and all the different stuff. It takes a certain amount of experience of understanding what we're seeing on the field and not to treat it just the same you would say at game tape or anything like that. It's a whole different environment, but we have, I meant to count. We've got close to 10 or 12 Locked On Podcast Network hosts hanging out around here, and a bunch of us each night we were getting together and doing a live stream on the Locked On NFL Draft YouTube channel, breaking down what we see. And we get so many good perspectives, everybody watching sort of different things and watching some of the same things and either confirming what we saw or disagreeing and able to sort of work out some of the different things we saw and why we saw those things. And we're able to get, I think, a very robust coverage of all of the different drills and practices, especially on a day like Wednesday where it was raining and it was raining hard and we were soaked and we were wet and we were uncomfortable. And between practices, I went to my car to dry off and try and warm up a little bit. I mean, we were all kind of we were all struggling in our own different ways with trying to stay dry. So collectively together, we're able to piece together, I think, a really comprehensive look at practice. And so I want to turn now to just a portion of the Locked On NFL Draft YouTube live stream we did, breaking down this day 2 practices of the Senior Bowl here in Mobile, Alabama.
Welcome, everybody. It's wet down here in Mobile, and things got a little bit interesting today. We're going to tell you what we saw, what we took away, who made themselves some money today. This is Locked On NFL Draft. This is Eric Crocker. I'm Ryan Tracy. This is the crew. We hope you guys are here. We are a daily podcast, and this is just a bonus for you. Tell us what you got from this day and what we won't see tomorrow as the team moves indoors. Let's go around the room, starting over here. Who are you?
Harrison Sanders.
Officially.
Lorin Cox, Locked On Bears.
Eric Ruckert, Locked On 49ers, and of course, Locked On NFL Draft.
As am I, and Chiefs too.
Tony Wiggins, Locked On Jaguars, Duval County, stand up, get a coach. And Locked On NFL on Wednesdays with James Rapine.
Brandon Olsen from Locked On Gators.
Louis DiBiase of Locked On Eagles.
John Hickman of Locked On Texans. And get a coach. And an OC. And a linebacker coach.
AFC South and Shambles.
Just get it all.
So it was a tough day out there. A lot of people had some issues. We all got soaked. I certainly did. A lot of takeaways. So let's start, Croc. What was the guy that stood out to you off the top?
Oh, man, Jermaine Johnson. I think he stood out for a lot of people. You go on Twitter, they're raving about him, and he didn't just stand out today, he stood out yesterday as well. And we want to talk about guys who made themselves some money. I think a lot of things that he showed today really kind of put into perspective, like, man, maybe this isn't a guy that has a day 1 grade. I know after the practice, I talked to my guy, Boy Mafe, out of Minnesota. He had a terrific day as well. But he was like, most of the guys that were there, they don't really have first-round grades. I think Jermaine Johnson probably catapulted himself at least into the conversation of being either at some point a day 1 pick, definitely an early day 2 guy.
Chiefs at 39 or at 30 sounds pretty good to me.
It's interesting that you said that because I think he's a better player right now than Jalen Phillips was last year. And I think Phillips went like 18th or something like that. Yeah. So it's real funny how drafts work because you got all of these guys that are projected to be legitimate edge rushers. I thought a guy that did well was my hometown guy, Myjai Sanders. When I saw his body yesterday, he didn't look like his lower half was I got skinny legs too, but he's not skinny. He just didn't look as big as the other players. But today you had a chance to see what makes him special. And what actually makes him special is his ability to come off with speed and then not give up on the play. A lot of times guys get hit with that. When that first move doesn't work, then they get stonewalled. He kept fighting through some stuff, and you can tell he's been well coached. So I think he's a guy who legitimately is a top 40 guy.
And one more thing to add about him too, as I was talking to my guy Ion, he's a defensive line guy. He did note that he is slim, but he said he has a big frame. So he said there's room for him to kind of build out his body and not take away from his ability.
Yep.
I think, too, you look at a player that yesterday was probably the best receiver for the entire day is FCS North Dakota State wide receiver Christian Watson. I did think he probably made the best catch of the day in one-on-ones against Kobe Bryant, a Cincinnati corner that also stood out. He went up the high point of the football along the left sidelines. I thought the throw was actually late. Watson had him beat by a lot. Probably could have led him. Carson Strong could have. Probably would have been a touchdown in a real game, but Watson adjusted. Bryant was closing in, went up for it, and in the rainy conditions today, he wasn't wearing gloves. I think this kid continues to show that he didn't just dominate at an FCS level, that he can be that at the pro level too. 6'4", explosive, creates separation consistently. I think, right now he's seen as maybe a late day 2, early day 3 pick. I think he's going at least second round when it's all said and done.
And Watson, I think he's got to be like one of the biggest winners this week. And there's still one more practice to go, so who knows? And that's the thing with the rain. Like, the rain complicates things, but I think when guys ball out with the rain, and in spite of the rain, it really helps them kind of up the ante and really rise their stock even more. Like you said, doing without gloves was even more impressive. And yesterday on day 1, like, he went up against a lot of guys that maybe were a little bit less, highly touted. He went up against Greg Jr., like, no offense to him, but he had a very rough day himself. So when I saw him line up against Kobe more than once, I want to say he got like 2 or 3 reps against Kobe and won consistently. I think, Crop, I've been kind of joking about, like, the Niners, they want to make Trey Lance work. Like, I think, Joe Burrow got his receiver. Get Trey Lance his guy. I think it makes sense. And Watson, I want him on both teams I cover. I don't even care.
Can we talk about the rain for a sec, though? Like, there were so many passes that were hitting the dirt, but, like, it's going to rain in NFL stadiums and in NFL games, and, like, you have to play through that, and wide receivers catch wet balls in the league all the time, and yet it felt like really consistently we saw a lot of passes dropped, and it's easy to say, oh, well, it's raining, so they're all going to have trouble getting open and catching passes, but shouldn't they not have that problem? I was sort of curious what you guys thought were, like, how much can we excuse from the rain versus how much is that just being kind of generous when there are college kids and all the other things we talk about, like how it's hard to produce really well at the Senior Bowl in these conditions. The rain doesn't seem like it's one of those conditions that should be any more difficult than normal.
Well, I do think this. I think it's not ideal because there's probably things that you want to get to and things that you want to see, but it is one of those unmanufactured things where you can say, okay, here's some adversity. Who's ducking behind? Who's acting like it's not raining? And Perry and Winfrey, because he was out there acting like they were playing football in Cancun on the beach. He did not care. And I think what that does is it's a job interview. So it's basically telling those coaches, okay, I don't want to be out here either, but that dude is acting like it's sunshine and rainbows, and I think that's what you want on your football team.
I do want to. Okay.
No, I just really like that Deuce Staley because we were talking about Brandon, like we were like, okay, everybody's anticipating the second practice of the day moving indoors, and we were all bummed out because like, oh man, we're not gonna be able to go see it and everything else. But then you find out that Deuce Staley actually, the Senior Bowl was, they're like, yo, we'll move you indoors, and Deuce was like, no, we're going outside, we're gonna practice outside, and I love that mentality from the coach, and I think it bleeds over to the players. And obviously only 3 days, but I think that shows a lot of moxie from Deuce himself.
I want to go back to the wide receiver group, and Beau Melton was a guy for me that whenever you stand out, I just have to look your way. And what he was able to do very well was win at the line of scrimmage. At times when they tried to get a hand on him, they wasn't even close. Very quick relief, maybe the quickest release off the line with his footwork, and was able to beat corners really quickly. And his speed at the top end was just able to blow past him. So 5'11", you guys mentioned Christian Watkins, a big receiver. He made up some money, but I think at 5'11", compared to all of the other guys out there, I think he boosted his stock as well.
Again, that was just a portion of well over a half hour of Senior Bowl Day 2 practice recap we did over on the Locked On NFL Draft YouTube channel. If you want more of that coverage, be sure to go check out them. And, of course, their show with Ryan Tracy and Eric Crocker. If you need more Bears analysis, of course, Locked On Bears podcast is here for you 5 days a week. So thank you for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. If you're looking for a second listen, Locked On NFL Draft. Ryan Tracy, Eric Crocker, they're both here. Been hanging out with them all week. They're good people. They know what they're talking about. They know NFL Draft, and they know how to break it down in a more digestible way, too. So it's definitely, if you're ready to turn your attention to NFL Draft season, that is going to be the place to go. Plus, we're going to have great Super Bowl coverage for you all next week. More Locked On hosts on hand in Los Angeles on Radio Row. Tons of great interviews. So hope you'll keep tuning back in. Tune back in tomorrow. We're planning some sort of Bears reporter analyst roundtable with some of the other Bears media that are down here, trying to get a bunch of people together all on one screen, breaking down everything going on with this team this offseason. So come back for that, and we'll break down the new Bears coaching staff next week and so much more. So I hope keep tuning in to Locked On Bears, and in return, I hope the Locked On Bears podcast makes it that much easier for you to bear down.